it's particularly motivational especially. I wanted to talk to you about something that I think that all of us may see in ourselves, or we may see it with our patients, or certainly with our families and others that are around us. And this is vitamin D deficiency. So, first of all, can anyone name the structure here?
Vitamin D.
Cool. No, it's K2, so we're going to get to this later. So we go to the next slide. So the next slide is actually vitamin D3. And we can get to this slide. And so we're going to be talking about vitamin D3 and its deficiency today. This is something that is very prevalent, and it has grave effects on many people. So vitamin D deficiency is something that's, there are about 3,000 genes that are related to vitamin D. Just last year alone, there were about 3,600 studies, medical studies that were done on vitamin D. It's something that's important. So we should all consider how it affects us and what's going on. It has a role in the calcium absorption and how our bones are mineralized. It deals with cell growth, neurotransmitters, immune functions, and so forth. So, you know, any of those slides, this slide here. Next one. That one, there you go. So you guys have probably seen people with these symptoms and conditions. You know, it's everyone. We all have sniffles and coughs, the flu season going around or not, or whatever it is that's causing people to sniffle or cough. Depression, you know, people may have weak bones, etc. And then there's the next slide. There's a whole host of other things. There's about 100 different conditions that vitamin D is related to. These are just a few others. So if you think about this, and then the next question is to consider, what's the common thread? Well, it's vitamin D deficiency. And the vitamin D deficiency, we want to know how prevalent it is, right? So how often do you expect that you're going to see this? So the vitamin D deficiency is something that we will see regularly. But first of all, I want to tell you that today we're going to talk about the deficiency. We're going to talk about how you can do testing for it. We're going to talk about sources and supplementation. We're also going to talk about different forms of vitamin D. And then lastly, we're going to talk about cofactors and other information that's relevant to it. And that's it. So there are a variety of studies that have been done recently that talked about its deficiency. As you can see, deficiency among some populations is exceedingly high. So in the UPenn study, African Americans or blacks are considered to have vitamin D deficiency of around 82%. That's really high. Hispanics, Asians, Middle Easterners also have very high rates of vitamin D deficiency. Part of that has to do with the melatonin in your skin color. But also, we see it with elderly, people who have bone formation deficiencies or strength deficiencies. Those are other things where we'll see that same vitamin D deficiency. In Australia, a country where everyone thinks, oh my God, there's tons of sun in Australia. Everyone's getting sunburned. Everyone's going to be wearing hats and so forth. Well, they are wearing hats and they are staying inside and they are deficient. So those that are below the age of 25, about a third of them have vitamin D deficiency as well. Some of the reasons for this can be, next slide, because you know, those of us that over the last 20 years there's been an increasing deficiency. And this deficiency has to do with increases in our weight. I've been putting on weight, maybe some others have too. I probably am reducing the amount of vitamin D deficiency. Milk. I don't drink milk anymore. I haven't drunk milk since I was, I don't know, maybe 13, 14, something like that. Many people are reducing the amount of milk that they're drinking, which is a fortified source of vitamin D. Also, many people are using sunscreen more often. Sunscreen will block the UVB rays, and you will not absorb any vitamin D when you're using sunscreen. So, what's going to happen? Possible reasons for deficiency. Next one. So also, it could be due to the fact that you're taking some kind of medication that may be blocking your absorption of fats. And since vitamin D is fat soluble, that may be an issue. Also, if you have other kinds of diseases like gallbladder or IBD, which is going to include your ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, these kinds of things can also cause a deficiency of vitamin D. So, next slide. We're going to talk about how do you test for this. So since we now have realized that it's very prevalent that people are deficient with vitamin D, we want to know how do you figure out where you stand. So the way that you can do this gold standard is doing a blood test. They're readily available, you can find them all over the place, and it's quite simple. They draw blood, they look at the vitamin D levels, and you want to make sure that you have a proper level. So proper levels, what is that? So below 12, not good. You have problems. You may be getting rickets if you're a kid, and if you're an adult, you may be getting all kinds of osteoporosis and other kinds of issues with your bones. You want to be at least above 40. Some studies say that you should be somewhere in the range of 60 to 80. It depends, right? So we're talking about lab ranges, functional ranges, but this is a whole other discussion. Point notwithstanding is you should try to stay with at least above 40. So there are a variety of ways that we can do this. So we also, next slide. As I mentioned before, there are a variety of factors that we have to consider. These factors are important as to how you would supplement your vitamin D if you're not getting enough naturally. So, next slide. The most easily absorbed way of receiving vitamin D, sunlight. We all should be getting outside. We live in a gorgeous place. There's sun so many days of the year. I just left Illinois where it was horrendous. There was hardly any sun. It's gray 3/4 of the year, and it was really hard to get enough vitamin D. So here we have the luxury of stepping outside in our breaks. We have breaks all day, right? We have a 9:20 break, we have a lunch break, we get 10 minutes between classes. Even when we get out of class, there's sunlight. So if we step outside and we get around 5 to 20 minutes of sunlight on 30% of our skin, we should be able to receive sufficient vitamin D. But that means you gotta have your face, your arms, maybe even your chest, all uncovered. Because you have to be able to absorb that skin, the sunlight directly into your skin. Without that, with sunscreen or too many layers on, you're not going to get enough vitamin D. Also, of course, if you have darker skin, you may need to spend more time in the sun. Next slide. So, other factors to consider are the latitude. People thought that may have an effect on your vitamin D absorption. That is not, in fact, true. So you don't need to worry about that. But cloud cover, for example, if you have full cloud cover, about 50% of the vitamin D, the UVB rays will not come through, and you will not be absorbing the vitamin D. As well as shade. If you're sitting underneath a tree, you'll be reducing about 60%. And if you're standing inside, the glass will not allow the vitamin B rays to be permeable. So consider those things as well. So different sources of vitamin D. So we can, if we're not getting it through the sun, we should be getting it orally, or there are some other ways as well. Some tanning beds example. So orally, there are two kinds. You guys have probably all seen them out in the stores. There's vitamin D2, there's vitamin D3. Big differences though. So vitamin D2. This is synthetic, it's often from mushrooms, you can create it from yeast as well. But it does not work as well. Vitamin D3, by contrast, this is what we get through the sun, when our skin absorbs it, the cholesterol is altered into D3, but it also can be found in food products. You can find it in milk, you can find it in egg yolks, and fish, and so forth. But we need to consider how this works and why D3 is so superior. So the next slide. D3 is superior because 87% more potent in raising and maintaining your vitamin D levels. That's significant. That's enough reason alone for you to choose to use vitamin D3 instead of vitamin D2. Not to mention the fact that your half-life of how vitamin D2 stays in your body is about 15 hours. Vitamin D3 stays in 15 days. So it's important to use vitamin D3 as the means by which you receive supplementation if you are insufficient. So let's talk about proper dosages. How much do you take? All right, so these ranges, you can find all kinds of different ranges, but it seems as though, this is quite broad, 2,000 to 10,000 IUs a day. And this depends upon your body mass, your skin color, how much sunlight you're getting, the foods you're eating, and so forth. But somewhere in that range would be an appropriate range for you to use on a daily basis. Now, if you are severely deficient, you may need a lot more. Some people use upwards of 50,000 in an immediate boost to try and get that range up if you know that you are severely deficient. So the next slide. So food sources. So we probably all know that fatty fishes are a great source of vitamin D. So there's lots of different fishes that you can use for that. About a tablespoon of cod liver oil will give you about 1,400 IUs. So that's pretty good. That's helping to boost your amounts, but it's not sufficient, right? You would still need other things in addition to that. Milk, by contrast, only gives you about 100 IUs in 1 cup. Or by contrast, breakfast cereals is only 40. Or an egg is only 40 as well. So considering those things, you would have to consume a lot. So, other cofactors that are important to consider when you're using vitamin D supplementation is K2. So, K2 is important because it's also fat soluble. It helps with moving calcium to the places where we need it and where we don't need it. So we don't want it in our blood vessels. We don't want it in our soft tissues, but we do want it in our bones. So if you were to supplement with D3, you want to also be taking vitamin K2. K2, it has a synergistic effects, as I mentioned, with calcium. It can be found in various food sources as well. And then how much do you take? So it's not entirely clear how much to take, but the general guidelines seem to be if for every 1,000 of vitamin D, IUs of vitamin D that you're going to be taking, you want to take approximately 100 to 200 of vitamin K. So what we talked about today is that vitamin D deficiency is prevalent. Lots of people have it. We're finding it all throughout the world. We're finding it in all age groups, and it's important for us to look at this. As doctors, I believe that it's important for us to be considering people's health as a whole. Not purely their spine, not purely the nervous system, but them as a whole. This is something that's important because it affects so many aspects of our life. And it's something that we can check quite readily, quite easily. And we can practice this in our own daily lives quite easily as well. So we talked about vitamin D deficiency, we talked about how prevalent it is, we also talked about the fact that it's easy to test for, and we talked about how much we can supplement, how we can supplement it through sunlight and food, and also other cofactors. So I'd like to close by thanking you all for taking the time to listen to me. There are a variety of resources on the next page. If you all are interested in more, the Vitamin D Council is a great resource, as well as these others are other good resources for this information as well. Appreciate your time.